Good evening, Who Dat Nation, and happy Wednesday, Bayou Blitz family. I hope everybody is enjoying the first portions of June out there. I know up here in Western Pennsylvania, I think summer weather has finally hit and stuck. And so I hope all of you are experiencing the same type of hot and summery weather out there. I am Bob Rose. I'm one of your co-hosts to your Bayou Blitz. Joining me, as always, my friend, my partner, your co-host, Brendan Boylan. Brendan, how are you tonight?
Good. It's been warmer here. We've had some summer showers, but we've had multiple pool days. It's in the 90s, upper 80s. It's starting to move that direction, which is nice. I will certainly take it. Much better than the cold. I know you agree.
Yeah.
The world tour has been on a little bit of a pause. I've been home this will be the second consecutive week, which is nice. And we have, some NFL news, but for me, also excited about the NBA Finals and what's been a competitive series so far. Also tip my cap to the people of New York for, if you know, you know. They did a wonderful job for certain parts of Game 3. But we're here. Saints have had their voluntary camp to this point, and we have a couple different things that we certainly want to talk about. But before we jump into that, Bob, I know you want to talk about our friends over at Get Checked or Check Out.
Yeah, I do. A big part of what we do on the Bayou Blitz each and every single week, for over a year and a half now, we're proud to call them friends and work with the people at Get Checked or Check Out. Their website is at the bottom of the screen, tcynow.org. Folks, this is a charity that was put in place almost 15 years ago to help guide people and their families through the next steps after you receive we'll call it a negative medical diagnosis. I'm not going to say lethal or deadly or anything like that, but just the kind of medical news that has your head spinning and your world upside down. You don't know where to turn next. You don't know what to do next. Get Checked or Check Out does, and they will help you guide through that next step in your process, whether it's a treatment option, facilities, research options, therapy options. That's why Get Checked or Check Out is there. They have helped thousands of cases in 2025. We're off to a good start in 2026. We're hoping to multiply that number significantly this year, but we need your help to do it. So like I said, go to that website, tcynow.org, check them out, see what they're all about, and donate. Every little bit helps, but I will tell you this. The major fundraiser that Get Checked or Check Out has every single year is the Go Black and Gold charity fan cruise. As most of you know, this past year, late March, we went to the Bahamas. Years prior, we went to Cozumel. The 2027 trip has yet to be announced, both specific dates and specific destinations, but I have been talking to Shireen, the co-founder of Get Checked or Check Out, quite a bit. That news is coming, so stay tuned to our pages and the Bayou Blitz. We will give you all the details upcoming about that. But in the meantime, Get Checked or Check Out has a new fundraiser this year, new to the NFL period. With the New Orleans Saints playing the first ever NFL game in Paris, France, against the Pittsburgh Steelers, Get Checked or Check Out wants you to party in Paris for a purpose. And you can join the Get Checked or Check Out Foundation in Paris, France for the Saints game against the Pittsburgh Steelers on October 25th. You can contact Tracy Ransom. Tracy's number is 225-400-3599. You can also email her at gltbytracy, TRACEY @gmail.com. Now, I mentioned Tracy because she is running all the details about the travel packages that include the 5 days of hotel, round trip airfare, and airport transfers. A deposit is required, but the final payment won't be due until August. I know for a fact that Tracy has some great packages available, so please contact her. You get to have fun, get to experience NFL history, get to enjoy a Saints game, and you get to do it with wonderful people at a wonderful charity while benefiting said charity. So like I said, contact Tracy Ransom, set up your opportunity to join a few former Saints legends and fellow members of your Who Dat family as you enjoy a Saints game, overseas fun and memories, and all while benefiting an amazing charity and the terrific people who run it.
Well said, Bob. We have some folks over in the chat right now, some folks that we haven't seen in a little bit. One of them, JGP, good to have you back hanging out with us. John Butler's in the chat. Said it about a month ago, maybe 2 months ago. You know, when you travel, time kind of escapes you. So
that it
John,
does.
I do need to reach out now that I've been 2 weeks in a row. So we will be reaching out to you about a few things. Let's talk about a few things. Let's talk about the Saints. Let's talk about some of our wish lists. You know, we did this going into, I guess, draft season. And so it's time to kind of revise our wish lists, what we're looking for from the Saints. I'm still waiting for veteran quarterback presence. I don't count Zach Wilson, so spoiler alert, that's probably still on my list. But Bob, I felt like we could just kind of have an episode that's a little bit more laid back, a little back and forth, not banter, but just some back and forth on what we expect and some things that we want. You had said right before we got on the air, you had been receiving a few comments or messages from some loyal listeners about Cameron Jordan. So I think that's a good place to start, because I believe that Cam Jordan returning to the black and gold is on the wish list for both of us.
Mm-hmm.
So let's start there. Kellen Moore, I don't want to say doubled down, but confirmed once again what we already knew. Mickey Loomis said a little while back that there was a contract offer on the table for Cameron Jordan. Kellen Moore said that again the other day. And now we just sit and wait. I know that there's going to be some frustrations that people are saying, well, you know, we're getting to that point of voluntary mini camp's going to be over soon, and we're getting close to mandatory mini camp and then training camp and this, that, and the other. And I believe there's a rock and roll song that says, you know, waiting is the hardest part. And that's kind of where we're at right now, is just the waiting game with Cameron Jordan. Bob, what's outside of what I just said, what's kind of the latest on the situation, and why is Cam a priority on your wish list?
Well, admittedly, guys, I know it's weird not to see the number 94 out on the practice field, even in OTAs and voluntary workouts, because, you know, for 15 seasons, Cam Jordan has come to everything. Whether voluntary or not, that was the one constant that you could always count on. And it's weird not seeing them out there. So I know a lot of you are impatient, particularly with the news of, from both coming from Kellen Moore and Mickey Loomis, that they do have a contract offer out to Cam, and they're just waiting on him. They don't seem too concerned about it. In fact, Kellen Moore's exact words were, Cam is going through, a personal checklist right now. And this is, first of all, I don't know the specific financial details of the Saints offer. nor do any of my sources, our sources, Brendan's and mine, around the organization. So they're keeping, the Saints are keeping that pretty tight-lipped. But that's irrelevant. I figure it this way: if it was the type of offer that Cam found, quote unquote, personally insulting, y'all know Cam, he would have come out and said it. My theory is Cam is waiting for two things. And Alan Ulrich and I talked a little bit about this on Under the Dome last night. Ever the businessman, Cam is still waiting for a potential other team to come in with an offer that might better the Saints. Now, knowing Cam and his loyalty to New Orleans, it would not surprise me if Cam does get an additional offer, that he doubles back to Mickey Loomis and say, hey, team X, Y, or Z offered me this. Can you better it? But that part's irrelevant. I do think that Cam is waiting to see if any other opportunities present themselves, not just financially, but perhaps with a team that's a heavy Super Bowl favorite this year. I also think that Cam will likely sign somewhere between the mandatory minicamp coming up quickly, as Brendan said, and the start of training camp. Because here's the thing, folks, even though Cam has never missed anything, Cam also doesn't need to be out there. I feel very strongly that he's kept himself in terrific shape. He always does. And from the Saints' perspective, Cam's going to turn 37 on July 10th. Even if if I'm coaching, even if Cam Jordan is with the team and at the facility right now, I'm having him do very, very little as far as the physical part of practices go. Because, I don't really need to know what he can do because I already know it. B, he knows the system. He played in it last year, played well in it last year. And C, I'm trying to save as much mileage as I can on that soon-to-be 37-year-old body because I don't need him to be fresh in training camp. I need him to be fresh in November, December, and hopefully January. So that's kind of my theory on when Cam Jordan is going to sign between minicamp and training camp and why it's going to take that long. Again, folks, I know that a lot of you are impatient. You want to see him back in uniform, back on the field. I do too. But I think that there's sound reasoning why it hasn't happened yet. Now, why I want it to happen and why it's high on my wish list is because I still think that edge rusher is the biggest remaining need on this football team. Carl Granderson, good player, not a dependable starter. Tyree Wilson, we'll see. I like the trade for him. They didn't have to give up that much. So it's a no risk, high reward situation. Chris Rumpf, solid rotational player, good against the run, doesn't give you much in the pass rush. Same with Anthony Jennings. My point is, yes, you have Chase Young on one side, but you need that complement on the other side. And right now on the roster, and I like Granderson, and I think you do too. You do too, Brendan. But Carl has never proven that he can do it consistently as a starter. Cam has. And even as a rotational or situational player, I think having Cam Jordan back in this building is a major need for the New Orleans Saints defense.
Yeah, I would agree. I do like Carl Granderson, but you used the correct word, and that's the lack of consistency from Carl Granderson, because you'll have a 3 or 4 week stretch where he racks up 4 or 5 sacks, and then you just don't see him for a while.
Yeah, he's on a milk carton for missing person milk carton for 8 weeks after that.
Yeah. So there's that. I think for me, the reason Cam is so high up on the list is, I think Alvin talked about it the other day when he reported for camp, is for such a long time it was just a no-brainer or inevitable that you would have these same few veterans come into the locker room, and you knew they were going to be there. Now we're at a point where we don't know. and that's a scary thing, and even Alvin admitted that. The nostalgic piece of it all, of course, I want Cam to be in the black and gold and retire a Saint and be a lifer. I think that his leadership is vital to what is a young team still trying to figure out their identity. I mean, how many times have we brought that up on this podcast over the last few years? Like, this team has lost its identity. This team doesn't have the culture. I hate that word's being thrown out as much as it is now, but they kind of lost that culture that made them really special in 17, 18, 19, 20. That 4-year stretch, like, it was just gone. And it's hard to replicate that, and especially when you have a new head coach and the changes of coordinators that they had under Dennis Allen, and so on and so forth. So having a guy like Cam who has been there, to some of the highest of the highs of this franchise, I think that's super invaluable to have. Clearly, the guy can still play. 10 sacks last year, 10.5 sacks last year. It's high on my wish list. Now, given, like you said, a lot of it's selfish. You don't get many lifers in sports anymore. Not just the NFL, just sports in general. You don't have guys that stick with one team. We instead have these moments where guys go and meet their idols, and they have one jersey on over the next, and they take one off and show the other one and show the other one. Oh, I've been loyal to you this whole time through the 27 of 30 teams that you've played for. That's just how it goes. Unfortunately, nowadays, or guys bounce around at the end of ring chase, and I don't really want to see that for Cam. I mean, obviously, if he wants to get a ring, like, go get you one. I think you brought up Ricky Jackson a few weeks ago as a guy that was, it was painful to see him leave. It was more painful because he went to the arch nemesis to win a championship. Yeah. And you don't want to see that for Cam either. Not that he's ever going to play for Atlanta or that Atlanta's going to find themselves in a Super Bowl anytime soon. But you don't want to see that. And so I do think it's valuable past my own personal wants and beliefs that Cam's on the roster again. And
we talk about the needed edge rusher opposite Chase Young. You look at the remaining available options in free agency. Hassan Reddick, Yetur Gross-Matos, Leonard Floyd, Joey Bosa. Flashy names, but I'll take Cam over any of them. Especially with the way he played last year. I think that it's noteworthy that all those names are still available, and a couple of them, all of them that I mentioned are younger than Cam. I think that we all need to take note that Cam showed us all he still has some football left in the tank. Now, obviously, the end is far closer than the beginning. Which again intrigues my own curiosity. What kind of offer do the Saints have on the table? Is it a 1-year deal? Is it a 2-year deal? What's in Cam's mindset? Is he going to report to training camp, whether it's the Saints or somewhere else, thinking that this is his swan song? And if so, how does that mindset affect him on the field? We know Cam to be a fierce competitor. But if mentally and emotionally you go in pretty much believing this is going to be it for me, does that change your intensity a little bit when you step between those sidelines? All things that we can talk about if and when Cam is back on the field, but these are things that that go through my mind in regards to the Cam Jordan situation.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think those are very valid things as well that are going through his mind. I think, and to go to another former Saint that had done some press in the last little bit, and I think it just kind of resurfaced on one of my timelines, was, Drew Brees talking about mentally, he was like, yeah, let's go. Like, I can play, and recalling a time where, hey, like, I'm gonna train as if I'm gonna get ready to play next week, because apparently there were some teams that were calling. And mentally, he was all there. He's ready to rock and roll, ready to go. And he had one of the kids run routes in the backyard, and he threw like one pass. He was like, "Yeah, it's not here. Like, no, can't do it." And so, yeah, sometimes you got to have that harsh reality and that harsh conversation with yourself. And again, I think Cam can still play. I don't think we've seen like a vast decline in Cam Jordan. He might have to look in the mirror and say, I can't be an every down guy anymore. But I think he can still play. And the question is, okay, if I feel good about this year, being able to give it all I got this year, I don't really know about next year. Like, I'm not going to go about next year until we get to the end of this year. And so that swan song thought does creep in and does go, okay, well, how much longer do I really have? And that's a scary thing too. And you know this as well as anybody else being a former athlete, is the older you get, there are certain moments, and there's not necessarily one big aha moment, but you wake up one day and you try to do something, you're like, ooh, I can't do that anymore. Or you wake up and you go, ooh, that felt a lot better doing that like 5 years ago than it does right now. Thankfully I'm not quite there yet, but I do recognize there's things like, even me, who's gonna enter his 30s in a month, I go, there's a lot of things that I used to be able to do when I was a freshman in college that I cannot do nearly as comfortably now. And for everybody in the chat who's like, oh, you just wait. No, I know. Trust me. I get it. I know. But that is like 10x for someone who's spent 15 years, 16 years in the National Football League now for Camp 2011. So math, yeah, it'll be 15 years. Like that's an even heightened example. So yeah, John said, listen to this young fella. Yeah, I know it's gonna get worse, but I've definitely already had some moments where like, ooh, I can't do certain things I used to be able to do.
Well, and Brendan, you've been around me, and like you said, I am a former athlete, but you've been around me. I walk with a limp. There are only certain directions that I can reach with my right arm because of my shoulder, and I don't have 15 years of NFL beatings on my body. Just 12 of pro-am volleyball. That does. And we have talked to Jim Everett, Courtney Roby, Tyrone Hughes, any litany of different players that have admitted that when you get later in your career, particularly once you become a parent, these kind of things do creep into your mind. You feel your athletic mortality, and the end is right around the corner. There might not be one or two aha moments, but it's there. And you can't hold them off. And believe me, folks, that's a scary feeling. But once you come to accept that, different players react differently to that acceptance when they're playing out the string. And I do think that Cam is going to play football in 2026. I still believe it's going to be for the New Orleans Saints. But again, if these are the kind of personal checklists that Kellen Moore mentioned that he's going over, and I have little doubt that it is, what kind of intensity are we going to see from Cam Jordan in 2026? And I think that that's a fair question.
Yeah, I do too. Like I said, I definitely see a reduced role for Cam. I'm not sure how reduced, but you're going to have to get more out of Carl Granderson. That's a discussion for a different day if Cameron Jordan is back, because there's still a possibility that he's not. Let's move on to the next thing on the checklist. Bob, I want you to take it away. What is next on your checklist of things you want to see or hear or whatever from the Saints or a specific player or coach or general manager, or we get to mandatory minicamp and then eventually training camp?
I want to see this wide receiver room sort itself out quickly. I am not calling for any personnel additions. Wide receiver and running back room. But I have a feeling you have running back on your mind also at some point. So I will stick with wide receiver. I'm not worried about the Chris Olave extension, folks. That's going to come sooner rather than later. If you tuned into Under the Dome last night, both Alan and I, seem to be in agreement that we believe it's going to be before training camp. But irregardless of when it's going to be, it's going to be. But how quickly does Jordan Tyson show why he was made a top 10 selection? How quickly does Bryce Lance establish himself within the receiving core? We know he's got ability, but we also know he's raw. Is Jalen Polk a training camp darling, or is he the type of player that I have been telling you guys about? Hey, the Saints may have gotten a steal, trading for a guy, giving up so little last year, even though they knew he wasn't going to play in 2025. Devon Bailey showed some remarkable chemistry with Tyler Shuck. Is that going to continue? And who's going to win the fifth receiver job? Trey Palmer, Barry Brown, Mason Tipton. I need that room to sort itself out quickly and in a good way. Not this guy's our number 3 receiver by default because everybody else sucked. I want it to be a highly competitive depth chart. And the Saints want it to be a highly competitive depth chart. That's why they invested so much, a first round and then 2 day 3 picks at the position. Now we just need to see it play itself out. We need to see those guys on the field, not necessarily through the OTAs, but certainly early portions of training camp, and establish a rapidly good chemistry with Tyler Shuck.
Over under 3.5 times we together say Trey Lance instead of Bryce Lance this year.
I did say Bryce before, right?
You did, but okay. But as soon as you said it, I was like, I'm gonna say Trey Lance this year. And
I almost did. That's why I caught myself. I don't know if y'all noticed the pause. I think, especially between us, I think that you got to go. You got to go the over.
You're smacking.
Yeah, I'm thrashing that over. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm like, I'm gonna do it. Honorable mention. Silly season wish list for Brendan. Go trade for Trey Lance. I'm a huge fan of brothers playing on the same team.
You are?
And there's no way that Trey Lance costs that much at this point. So, and somebody look this up because I'm not, unless Bob knows off the top of his head. Trey Lance was a Charger. He might still be a Charger.
I think he is.
Was there any overlap with Kellen Moore?
No.
Somebody look that up. No.
No, I am. Y'all are more than welcome to look it up. I am pretty positive there was no overlap. Ironically, just the opposite. Trey Lance arrived to the Cowboys via trade the year after Kellen Moore left, and then Trey ended up on the Chargers the year after he left there.
Oh, so it's just really close. Okay.
Yeah.
I was like, there may have been because he's been in multiple spots, but okay. But still, that's kind of my silly season wish list is like go trade for as many brothers as you can, just because I think it's fun when you can get brothers, cousins, like just whatever on the same team. I would think of the McCourties, obviously, were the famous pair for a long time. That got to actually, spend a couple seasons together, won a championship together. So that's always fun.
Hey, listen, and they signed Zach Wilson with the mindset of, hey, this is a former top 5 draft pick. We're not asking him to win the starting job, even compete for the starting job. We just want to see, because of the success that Sam Darnold had after being a colossal bust, I see the logic behind the Zach Wilson signing, but you can eye up trying to acquire Trey Lance with that same kind of mindset, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, I'm still in the boat. I think I said this on draft night when Bryce was selected, and we kind of talked about Trey a little bit. Like, I remember doing the draft-a-thon with you when Trey Lance got selected, and I said something along the lines of like FCS players can be NFL players too.
Sure.
And I had a lot of faith in him to be a good quarterback. Maybe not a great quarterback, but a good quarterback. And I still don't think he got a fair shot of it. I mean, that team sucked, and he got hurt, and it happens. We've had this conversation so many times on this show where it's become more of a trend lately where quarterbacks are not given time to develop.
Mm-hmm.
And they wanted a quick answer. And also, unfortunately for Trey Lance, Mr. Irrelevant became a really good football player for the Niners and won like 13 games or something crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no getting your job back after that. And that's just the way it is. Let's see. Scott says, I'm on the seesaw on whether we need a vet quarterback. I think Zach might be good enough. I'm going to save that thought for later. But my number one thing on the wish list, this kind of weird portion prior to training camp, is I want to see what I want this team to solidify the linebacking corps. And what I mean by that is you now have multiple guys that do multiple things well. And for the first time in, maybe not forever, but the first time in a while, I do feel like you have some diversity at that position where guys are able to do some different things well. Obviously, Isaiah's been your guy since day one. I still think he has a role on special teams, and some of that athleticism could get him a few snaps on the defensive side.
Mm-hmm.
I think bringing Caden Ellis gives you a little bit of a different dynamic. He's certainly not the same player as Demario Davis, but I remember the one thing that really impressed me with Ellis the first go around in New Orleans was speed, his ability to read plays, and his pursuit to the football. Those are things that I think are going to suit this team really well. I do think that there is a lack of coverage or guys that are good in coverage, but I also think part of my mind might be fogged because of how good DeMario was in coverage. So I want to see some of those things play out. I also want to see what's going on with Pete Warner, because that's kind of been I don't want to say a bubble guy. Like, he's definitely going to make the team if he's on the team, but he's a guy where it's like, what is his role at this point? Right. A lot of people were pounding the table for Danny Stutzman to see some increased time. I thought Stutzman was good in the time that he got last year, but there's also a lot of need for improvement from him. I think he's a little bit more, I don't want to say one-dimensional, but he's closer to one-dimensional than two-dimensional. So I want that to work out, because that has been something that has been a piece of the puzzle that hasn't been worried about a whole lot because of how good DeMario had been over the years. And so I want to see Caden Ellis kind of step into, I don't want to say a grown-up role, but, DeMario spoke so highly of him even his first stint in New Orleans. Mm-hmm. I want Caden to kind of step into that leadership role, really, really take it. And then I want to see the defense kind of maneuver and work with some of these pieces around the things that Caden does well, while also being able to hide some of the things he's not as good at.
And it's that latter part that actually worries me about the linebacker core. Not not as many people as there should be have been talking about the defensive leadership. I've mentioned it. I've wrote and written about it a little bit, but I think you hit the nail on the head. With Caden. We both applauded the Saints for moving decisively to get Caden Ellis back in the building once they lost to Mario Davis. And I think that had as much to do with the leadership aspect as it does the on-field aspect. I don't think anybody in their right mind expects Caden Ellis to do everything Demario Davis was able to do. Demario Davis is a unicorn. But we know Caden can rush the passer. We know that he's a pretty good sideline to sideline athlete, and we know that he's capable in zone coverage. He struggles in man, but a lot of linebackers do. Like you said, Demario, not many have had the abilities that Demario Davis had. But I also think we're going to find out that having Demario Davis masked a lot of the liability that Pete Werner is. And I've been calling him a liability for several years, in space, especially in coverage, but in space.
When they drafted him.
I did not. I did not, because that's what I saw. Now, to be fair, I thought at the time that their mindset was, we're drafting this guy to eventually replace Demario Davis. And I'm like, well, this guy is not capable of replacing Demario Davis. Not physically capable. Now, don't get me wrong. Werner is a good run defender. He's a rugged guy in between the tackles, but you get him in space at all, and he's a liability. And that was my scouting report. And I know Alan Ulrich loves Danny Stutzman, and there are things I love about Danny Stutzman, but that was a similar scouting report that I had on Danny Stutzman coming out of Oklahoma last year. So in losing Demario Davis, you got weaker. In space. That unit as a whole got weaker in space. Now I'm waiting for Isaiah Stallbert. I think Isaiah Stallbert has a great opportunity here to step up and be that guy. But we shall see. It is a position that worries me. And there are a few interesting names still available on the free agent market that, if Stallbert or Stutzman doesn't come along how they like, that you might see a move in training camp. It's an article I will probably write about as we get, once the mandatory mini camp shuts down. I'll probably do an all-encompassing available offensive players, available defensive players that are still out there. But I mean, in the meantime, the Saints aren't going to sign anybody immediately, because they want to look at the same things that you and I want to look at. They want to see how Tyree Wilson and those other guys do on the edge. That's another reason, by the way, why they don't feel like they need Cam Jordan in the building right now. They want to see how Isaiah Stallbert, how Danny Stutzman are developing. What can Caden Ellis do in Brendan Staley's defense? Yes, Caden Ellis spent, what was it, Brendan, 5-6 years with the Saints? But remember, it was in a different defense. Now Caden's a smart guy. He'll pick up the defense quickly. But what kind of drop-off is there going to be from Caden to from Demario to Caden? We know there's going to be some. How big is it? And I think that I think all of us are just kind of, that's an underrated concern that I don't think nearly enough people are talking about.
Yeah, no, I definitely see linebacker being the biggest question mark. Going into training camp. Back to you, Bob. What's something else on your wish list?
Let's stay on the defensive side. I want to see somebody take command in the middle of that defensive line. Devon Godshaw, in my opinion, was a colossal disappointment last year. Now, they didn't give up a lot to get him in that 2025 trade, But make no mistake, they traded for him with the expectation this is the guy that's going to be our early down nose tackle, our run stopper, and improve our run defense. And while the run defense did improve, little of that improvement had to do with Devon Godshaw. He flashed some things, but not nearly consistent with enough consistency, and more often than not, actually got pushed off the spot. I think it's a major reason why the Saints re-signed John Ridgeway, because Ridgeway, in the handful of games that Ridgeway was able to play in 2025, Ridgeway was actually better against the run than Godshaw was. And I think it's a major reason why they spent a second-round pick on Kristen Miller. Something that I didn't necessarily like it. I would have preferred to see them go edge rusher. Don't get me wrong. I came into the draft. I came into the off season highlighting nose tackle, defensive tackle, or interior defensive line is a need that must be addressed. They just addressed it sooner than what I thought that they did. And Miller's been dealing with a hamstring injury, so hasn't been on the OT, been on the practice field a lot to this point. I'm not necessarily concerned about the injury status yet, because you're not going to see these interior guys do much tussling anyway, nor do you really want them to. But is Kristen Miller going to be able to fill that spot that Devon Godshaw couldn't last year? If he can't, who can? Is it going to be Godshaw? Is it going to be Xavier Harris? There's going to be a lot more interior competition. And Vernon Broughton, we didn't get to see anything out of Vernon Broughton last year because he got hurt. How is he going to factor into this? Is he going to be more of an interior guy, or is he going to be more of a Brian Bresee, Nathan Shepard kind of guy? Where when they do go to a 4-man front, Brockton will be one of the guys in that middle rotation, but on a 3-man front, he's going to be more like a Shepard or a Bresee on the outside. Where does Vernon Broughton fit in? So I'm very, very interested to see how this defensive line shuffle plays itself out.
I think that's a good one. You kind of hinted towards my next thing on the checklist. That's running back. And some of it is because of is Alvin going to be here? Is Alvin not going to be here? That whole thing, which ultimately Bob and I have made it very clear our thoughts that we both believe that Alvin's going to be around. But remember at the end of last year, the Saints were playing a handful of different running backs.
Mm-hmm.
Estime had a few good games. I liked what I saw to Devin Neal. I'm, as we've mentioned before, maybe one of the few people in the world that is still holding out any sorts of hope for Kendre Miller, though a lot of it is dangling off of a cliff right now. But there's a lot going on there. And now I don't think Estime is going to be on the team. I think Devin Neal's an interesting one. He's going to have to earn a spot on special teams, I think. Unless you just cut Kendre Miller and Devin Neal's your third back. But I want to see how it's going to work. Because I remember when we were talking running backs prior to free agency, prior to the draft, and HN or ETN's name had came up, I said the one thing that would scare me about that is I feel like he does a lot of things that Alvin Kamara does. I think they're very similar. I think that HN is a little bit bigger. I think he maybe can provide you a little bit more in between the tackles than Kamara can at this point in his career. But I still think they're very similar, which could work in your favor, but it could also cause a weird imbalance of not knowing how to utilize the both of them. Now, I think Kellen Moore's smarter than that, and I think Kellen Moore is going to find the balance that makes it work between the two of those guys. But it's not something that's going to happen overnight, and it all starts in these camp sessions, which is another reason we talked about this a few weeks ago, why I thought Alvin reporting to camp was a smart thing for Alvin. But that's what I want to see work out. Because how many years in a row have you and I been yelling at clouds like crazy old people, begging the Saints to utilize Alvin Kamara better, especially in the passing game, and not letting him run up the middle about 30 times a game. I do think this opens up a door or an opportunity to do so.
Mm-hmm.
But all that stuff has to start now, not in the preseason, not in week 1. I do not want to get to a point like we did in 2017. And this is what I mean by that. Because 17 was really fun for both Ingram and Kamara. But a lot of people forget there was another running back in that room that got traded.
Yep.
And that was Adrian Peterson. Now, we're not talking about a third running back in this situation, right? But what was the one thing about Peterson? There was a lot of things that Peterson did well that Mark Ingram did well.
Mm-hmm.
Ingram ended up being the guy the Saints went with. I think he was able to stiff arm Peterson a little bit because of his ability to catch the ball and how much better he got as a pass catcher throughout his career. Along with, some of the, infamous clips of Peterson and Sean Payton. But ultimately, you had two guys that did things very similarly. And I remember having conversations within my own circles about, hey, how do you think this plays out? And I'll never forget one guy said, he said, and this is before the season and before everything happened, he said, I would not be surprised if this is pressure on Ingram. And if Ingram doesn't live up to the pressure, he will be traded by the deadline. Which I had the opposite thought. I didn't think Peterson would get traded, but I certainly thought they'd work a way to have all three of them in the offense. And it clearly didn't work. I don't want to get to a point where we're, week 3 into this season, and I go, ooh, this looks a lot like 2017, where the offense just doesn't – it almost feels like you're force-feeding a guy because you signed him, opposed to him actually working and flowing within the offense. So that's on my wish list as well.
And it's funny, when Alan and I were talking about Kamara last night, we both agreed that exactly what you said. ATN, the running back formerly known as ATN, is a lot like Alvin Kamara in the things that he does well. Only he's about 5 years younger. And I remember this is Kellen Moore inherited Alvin Kamara. With Travis Etienne, Kellen Moore said, "This is the running back I want for my system." So this running game offense is going to revolve around Etienne, not Alvin Kamara.
Right.
And because they are of similar skill sets, and you do have a deeper receiver room, and you do have a deeper tight end room, what opportunities are there going to be for Kamara? Now, I'm like you, Brendan. I feel pretty confident that Kellen Moore will find something for him, find a niche for him. But if he doesn't, you're talking about a severely reduced workload, because it's not like you're going to bring Alvin Kamara in on 4th and short to get that half yard that you need for a touchdown or a first down. Devin Neal was far more impressive than Kamara was as a pass blocker last year. And, Kendre Miller or Audric Estime, whoever stays healthy and effective, both being the key, they'll be your inside runner. They'll be your short yardage runner. So, and it's funny that you mentioned Adrian Peterson, because when Alan and I were talking about that last night, that actually popped into my head. I'm like, yeah, I all of a sudden it just clicked, because I hadn't thought about it before. But I'm like, 2017, Kamara emerged, 2-3 games into the year, like a lightning bolt. But that's when you realize that Ingram and Peterson both are essentially the same kind of back, with actually Ingram bringing a little bit more versatility, as you said. So Ingram got the bulk of the carries early on, and Peterson did not handle it well. Famously, did not handle it well. How is that? If this plays out that same kind of way, how is Alvin Kamara going to handle it? And if he handles it poorly, how are the Saints going to handle him? We won't know the answer to that until September, maybe October. But I think it's worth keeping an eye on. It's there, tons of storylines, man. Really, couple that you really didn't think about until we said this is what we're going to talk about heading into tonight, and you're like, you know what? There's a couple really juicy storylines to watch.
Oh yeah, I do think the Camaro one is interesting, and to be honest, I hadn't really thought about the Peterson thing much, but something clicked in my head, and I was like, yeah, like there is the potential for this to end up the same way. We talked about it the other night, so maybe this is a good way to. We'll both throw out one more, just kind of like honorable mention one, or I've mentioned a silly season one, so but remember we talked the other night about like guys we wish worked out.
Mm-hmm.
Was that last week? Adrian Peterson is a guy that I wish worked. And now, in like hindsight being 50-50, I'm glad it didn't work out because we got
right.
That was awesome. But when that signing happened, I was like, dang, could you imagine if you could have another, kind of three-headed backfield, like thinking very much like 09, right? Because everybody wanted to go back to 09. It's like, man, Peterson's at the tail end of it. Like, we don't need him to do much. And it just... That was a guy who fans of Adrian Peterson have about 15 different jerseys they have to throw on as they, go, hey, Adrian, look, I've supported you my whole career. Because at the end of that run, it was like, he's playing for who? But I really was hoping that Adrian Peterson would work out. I was pretty excited about that because that was a superstar name. Yeah. And let's face it, the Saints do not get superstar names in free agency. And so, tail end of his career, you're like, dang, that's Adrian Peterson. Here's a reference, and maybe I'm out of pocket for this, so correct me, older and wiser Saints fan. But I'm sure it felt kind of similar, like Earl Campbell. Like, it was a big name towards the end of the career. You're just like, wow, we managed to get that guy. Earl had better production for the Saints than Adrian Peterson did.
Longer, I don't know, but yeah.
That's what I was going, like, Adrian Peterson played, 3 games in New Orleans? 4 games in New Orleans, maybe? If any of you have an Adrian Peterson Saints jersey, please at me. Like, post it and tag me in it because I want to see it. Even better, if any of you have signed Adrian Peterson Saints memorabilia, I know one of you crazy people has a full-size helmet signed by Adrian Peterson. Like, I want to see that because there's no way there's many of those in the world. But Bob, if you want to kind of bring us home, give me one last one. It could be an honorable mention, a silly season, just something quick.
Did I do both Donnell Ellerbe and Kobe Fleener last week?
You did.
Damn, I was afraid I did that.
Like, dang it, I knew that I should have saved one.
I know. Here's one, and it's one that's going to cause a lot of anger among Saints fans, and it's a recent one. But when the Saints signed Jared Cook, I was over the moon excited.
It's not a bad one. I still think to this day, and a lot of it's because of the fumble.
Right.
But I think he gets a lot of unnecessary hate from Saints fans because, yes, the fumble, he dropped a few in the end zone, but he was relatively good for the team.
His first year in New Orleans, I thought he was very good. You can make a strong case he had the best season for a Saints tight end since Jimmy Graham. The numbers certainly show that. Yeah. His second year, the numbers weren't bad, but like you said, there were a couple costly drops in the end. Yeah, even playoff fumble aside, there were a couple costly drops. for scoring opportunities. And it seemed to me, and I remember writing more than once at the time, Jared Cook just doesn't seem to be giving the same kind of effort this season as he did last season, and openly questioning his effort. That's a name that gets thrown by a lot of Saints fans, thrown into the category of the Brandon Browners and the Jairus Birds and the CJ Spillers. I don't think Jared Cook deserves that, because he was a lot better than that. But yeah, I mean, I had to throw it out there anyway, because like I said, when they signed him, I was over the moon excited. I'm like, this is going to open up so many things for Michael Thomas, Alvin Kamara, everybody else. And, for that first year it did. And the second year, not quite as much.
You said a name that I hadn't said yet. And this is one you and I disagree on. We talked about it before. And I was really excited for CJ Spiller.
I was not.
And I think I was excited for CJ Spiller because of wearing, people call it different things. I like the term graduation goggles. And for those of you who don't know what I mean by that, is you hate everything about high school or a player, but as soon as it's coming to an end and you have that fear of missing out, that FOMO, you get graduation goggles and you remember things like so much better than they actually were. And I think I had graduation goggles when it came to CJ Spiller because of the Clemson years, not because of how bad it was in Buffalo and how bad it was for his NFL career, but being like, dang, if we could get half of the CJ Spiller that dominated the ACC, and also credit to CJ Spiller, sidebar for all you Clemson fans out there, he was the real pipeline to getting Clemson back on the map, because
yes, he was.
He should not have gone to Clemson, but he did, and then Clemson ended up becoming a powerhouse, and Dabo Sweeney and all that. So props to CJ Spiller there. He's actually working for the university now.
Good for him. And listen, I agree. CJ Spiller, one of the best college running backs I've ever seen. And he had good numbers in Buffalo. He had some injuries. I labeled him as fool's gold when the Saints signed him, because I'm like, this feels like an injury waiting to happen, and lo and behold, it was. I term CJ Spiller's tenure in New Orleans as an unmitigated disaster.
I'll give you one more, and then we'll close out. And I don't remember it being bad. I just remember it not being. It was kind of just one of those, like, it was a wash, right? It was a push. It wasn't great. It wasn't bad. It just is what it is. And I think a lot of it had to do with the teams during that time. I'm also biased because it was one of the first players to actually comment on an article that I did. And that was Ty Montgomery. I was very excited for Ty Montgomery in that offense because I thought with Sean Payton and Ty Montgomery being a guy who could be a running back, played some receiver, was a return man, I thought he was going to be utilized very well in that offense. And he didn't really have even a defining moment. It was just, he was kind of just there and was never really utilized the way that I thought he would, especially during his early years in Green Bay. But I remember writing an article when he signed saying how much sense it made for him in that offense. And that was one of the first guys that, liked, commented, reposted, all that stuff. And I was like, oh, dang, that's cool.
It is cool.
That's cool. He actually read that and agreed with what I said. And maybe, I read his mind and why he signed in New Orleans, and it just didn't work, which I feel a lot better about those ones where it's just kind of a push, it's just a wash, just didn't work out, than the ones where you got, oh my God, excited and got disappointed. That one was just kind of like, okay, well, didn't work. Well,
that's a good one to end on. I think we'll do one or two of these every week
until we run out of. Until we're like, that one already.
Yeah, right. I'm still mad at myself that I did both Donnell Ellerbe and Kobe Fleener last week, though. I should have saved it.
No, those were good ones. I think fun ones too, and I'll have to sit back and like think about it. There's a lot of guys that were like rookies that I was excited about, and they were like very good in Madden franchise, and they were really good in my Madden franchise, but not really good for the actual franchise. So those will be ones to think about as well. I don't know why this name came in my head, and I'm not really saving it for anything because it doesn't really count to this category. But Junior Galette, that's going to be one. How about biggest letdowns? That's going to be too. We can talk about that, like just letdowns or 1 year wonders or something like that. Like we can play this game. We can play all sorts of games, throwing you guys weird names at the end of episodes. But
I already know who I'm going to do next week, but I had to write it down because, so I remember. Yeah.
The handy dandy notebook. See, I'm not that quick with it. I'm gonna have to really sit and that one. But Bob's gonna have some actual Saints news and not just random, fun, silly season opinions. He'll have those too that he writes over at Saints Wire, a USA Today publication. But Bob, where can people follow you and your work as we get closer and closer to non-silly season and more actual football season?
Yeah, I mean, for sure, we'll have some analysis coming out, from OTAs, from mini camps, things to watch, position battles to highlight as we head towards training camp. Currently, I am doing what I've done for the last several years. We are today is 95 days till New Orleans Saints kickoff against the Detroit Lions on September 13th, and I am doing two countdown pieces per day till we get down to 0. One is a Saints player of the day, whatever Saints player is wearing that particular jersey number. So John Ridgway's was today's topic, along with every Saints player to have ever worn the 95 jersey. And again, I do that with every jersey number. 94 was fun to write. So tune in for that one tomorrow. But you could tune in for all of my articles. Easiest way, like Brendan said, is just find the Saints Wire. It's available everywhere. Facebook, Twitter, obviously just your Google standards Google search engines too. But I also post my articles as well as our show links on my own personal social media, which is Bob Rose on Facebook, at Bobby R 2613. And don't forget, folks, as we creep towards training camp, our Bayou Blitz Facebook page will be much more active. But that depends on you guys, how active. I need you guys to kind of spearhead that movement for us. We said from the creation of that page, Brendan and I did, that this was you guys' page to kind of run, make it grow. And I'm proud of the way y'all did that, both with the Facebook page and the Twitter page. But please continue to do that, especially as we near football season. And don't forget to check out the Get Checked or Check Out website at tcynow.org. See what they're all about. Stay tuned to the Bayou Blitz for upcoming announcements, both not only for the 2027 cruise destination location, whatever it happens to be, but also we're going to be working on 1 or 2 Get Checked or Check Out get-togethers this year too for Saints games, whether it's on the road or in New Orleans has yet to be determined. But Charlotte's one thought I had. Baltimore is another. Baltimore could be a fun one, drivable for you, drivable for me. But yeah, still got to talk to the powers that be over at Get Checked or Check Out. See what all those guys think about that, and get to work on organizing some details about that. But in the meantime, you still have your opportunity to reserve your spot for the Get Checked or Check Out get together in Paris, France for the Pittsburgh Steelers game. If you missed all the details, the contact details about that, you can either jump back to the beginning of this broadcast or reach out to me, and I will be happy to give you those contact details, names to set up your travel package today.
For myself, you can follow me virtually everywhere right here at BT Boylan. We're getting closer and closer to football season, which is an exciting time, and I know we are very excited for some of these. It's not a future, it's already a partnership, so I wouldn't call it a future partnership, but future opportunities to kind of get out into the community and connect with you guys with Get Checked or Check Out. We definitely have some fun stuff up our sleeve, a couple ideas we want to throw out there, and I know as the weather gets warmer as well, Bob's going to be looking forward to trying to get out and about, meet some of you guys, and as I whispered in the mic, I'd love to get you guys here in Charlotte, do a live show in Charlotte. I'd really like doing stuff like that. So looking forward to all of that as we get closer and closer. But until next week, that's Bob Rose. Ooh, I got it right the first time. That's Bob Rose. I'm Brendan Boylan. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Bayou Blitz podcast. And until next week, hope you guys find some peace, spread love, practice positivity. See you then. Who dat?